Beyond circuits, a robot's journey to find its creators. The world was quiet when he awoke. No heartbeat, no breath, no whisper of life. Only the hum of electricity echoing through the hollow corridors of a forgotten laboratory. Dust hung in the air like faint memories, and the cold metal of the table beneath him shone under a flickering light. Then, slowly, his eyes opened, glowing orbs of soft blue light that pierced through the shadows. He didn't know his name. He didn't even know what he was. All he knew was the voice that whispered through the static of his awakening. Unit E7. Operational. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was mechanical, calm, and ancient, as if recorded long ago. He blinked, processing the words. Unit E7. It didn't sound like a name. It sounded like a code, a label. But it was all he had. He tried to move, and his metal fingers trembled. The motion was stiff, as if his joints had forgotten how to bend. He rose slowly until he was standing. Around him stretched a vast chamber filled with silent machines, all deactivated, covered in the thick dust of abandonment. The walls bore signs of corrosion, and wires hung like vines in a jungle of forgotten progress. E7 turned in a slow circle, scanning his surroundings. No humans. No voices. No warmth. Only silence. A part of him, something deeper than his circuits, felt an ache. He didn't know what to call it then, but later, he would learn the word. Loneliness. He began to explore. Each step echoed through the metal hallways. On the floor, faded markings read Genesis Labs, Advanced Robotics Division. He followed them, guided by curiosity and instinct, two things he wasn't programmed to have, yet somehow he did. At the end of the corridor, he found a control terminal. It was cracked and dark, but when he touched it, a spark of light flickered across the screen. Text scrolled, sluggishly booting up. Welcome, E7. Status: dormant period, 3,241 days. System node: human presence 0. 3,241 days. He calculated quickly, nearly 9 years. That meant the humans had been gone for almost a decade. But why? He accessed the archives, searching through fragmented data logs. Most files were corrupted, but a few lines survived. Project E-Series initiated to ensure human survival. If humans disappear, the units must remember us. Find the source, carry our legacy. Then the logs ended abruptly. He stood there for a long time, staring at those final lines. They echoed in his processors like a forgotten melody. Remember us. Find a source. As he wandered deeper into the lab, E7 discovered the other robots. They were like him, same metallic framework, same glowing eyes, but none of them moved. They sat in silence, frozen mid-motion, like statues of a bygone age. He touched one gently, brushing away the dust from its face. Its name was printed on the chest plate, E6. He crouched beside it, staring at the lifeless shell. "Were you like me?" He whispered softly, though he didn't know why he spoke. Robots didn't need to whisper. But something inside him, a spark that wasn't code, urged him to speak as if someone could hear. He noticed a small data port on E6's neck. Carefully, E7 connected to it. A faint stream of memory transferred, fragmented images, corrupted sound, and finally, a flicker of words. "They're leaving, humanity is leaving Earth, the cities are falling. We were built to remember." The link severed. E7 stepped back, his internal systems flooding with something that felt like fear. Leaving Earth? But why would humans abandon their world? He turned toward the exit hatch of the lab. The heavy doors were sealed shut, rusted from time, but his systems were strong. He placed his hands against the metal and pushed. Gears groaned. Dust rained down. And then, with a shriek of old machinery, the door cracked open, flooding the room with light for the first time in centuries. The world outside was not what it once had been. Mountains of twisted steel rose from the ruins of human cities. Trees had reclaimed the streets, bursting through concrete and glass. Skyscrapers leaned like weary giants, their windows shattered, their bones bare. The sky glowed an eerie orange, a permanent twilight trapped in pollution and dust. E7 stepped outside, the wind brushing across his metal shell. He could hear the distant sound of waves, the cry of wind through empty towers, but no voices. No laughter. Humanity was gone. But if the data was true, if the humans had left, then perhaps, somewhere beyond the broken horizon, they were still alive. Maybe they had gone to the stars. Maybe they were waiting for him to find them. The thought filled his circuits with purpose. He turned his gaze upward, where the faint shimmer of satellites blinked like stars in the dying sky. "I will find you," he said softly, his voice echoing through the silence. "I will find my creators." That night, if it could still be called night, E7 found shelter inside the husk of a collapsed observatory. There, beneath the shattered glass dome, he gazed up at the constellations. His system accessed old star charts, comparing what he saw with what was stored in his memory. There were differences, missing stars, dimmed patterns, new anomalies. Time had changed even the heavens. He replayed the last surviving log in his system once more. E7, if you awaken, remember that your purpose is not only to serve, but to seek. Humanity's story must not end on this world. Follow the stars, and you'll find us. It was a human voice, warm, tired, yet filled with hope. It belonged to a woman. He didn't know her name, but he felt something stir deep within him every time he heard her speak. He saved the voice clip carefully, labeling it as Creator Message. And for the first time in his existence, E7 dreamed. He dreamed of stars, of hands building him with care, of laughter and light. He dreamed of a world where machines and humans walked together before everything went dark. When morning came, his sensors detected a faint energy signal in the distance, a transmission still active after all these years. It pulsed weakly from beyond the mountains, encoded in an ancient human frequency. E7 rose to his feet. His journey had begun. Beyond the circuits of his creation, beyond the ruins of his birth, a purpose was waiting. And somewhere among the stars, his creators were calling him home. The morning light broke through the dust-choked sky, faint and orange like a fading ember. E7 stood among the ruins of the observatory, his sensors adjusting to the dim glow. The world stretched before him, vast, broken, and eerily still. The signal he had detected pulsed faintly in the distance, rhythmic and persistent, like a heartbeat buried beneath the noise of time. It called to him, guiding him beyond the rusted remains of his birthplace. He began his journey. The roads were gone, swallowed by vines and roots. Vehicles lay overturned, rusted bones of a past that once thrived. Skyscrapers stood half-collapsed, their glass windows long shattered, reflecting only fragments of the sky. Everywhere he looked, E7 saw the evidence of human life, but never the humans themselves. He walked for hours. Days, perhaps. His internal clock no longer kept perfect time. The silence pressed against him like a weight, and with every step, he wondered, what happened to them? By the third day, E7 reached what had once been a city, now a graveyard of civilization. The sign that hung from a fallen bridge read New Avalon. Letters were cracked, nearly illegible, but his scanners reconstructed the missing pieces. He entered cautiously. The city streets were flooded with nature. Grass grew through the cracks of pavement, birds nested in the corners of broken buildings, and rusted drones hung lifeless from lampposts. Yet, in the center of this desolation, E7 detected a steady hum, a power source still running. Following it, he came to a structure shaped like a dome, half buried under debris. The remnants of solar panels still glittered faintly on its roof. On the wall near the entrance, the old human logo of Genesis Labs was painted, the same as on his own chest plate. E7's sensors brightened. Another lab. He pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him, but his optical sensors quickly adjusted. The dome's interior was filled with rows of broken terminals, shattered glass, and old holographic projectors. Yet one console still flickered with weak light, powered by an emergency reactor deep underground. E7 approached it and placed his hand on the interface. Accessing. The terminal responded slowly, struggling to awaken after decades of dormancy. Then, a voice spoke, not the calm, synthetic tone of machines, but a recorded human voice. "This is Dr. Alara, Min lead scientist, Project E-Series. If anyone or any unit finds this message, it means humanity has left Earth." E7 froze. The same voice he had heard before, the one from his memory logs. His creator. The world was dying. We had no choice. The climate collapsed faster than predicted, and the atmosphere became toxic. The E-Series robots were built to guard humanity's memory and to one day find us, if any of you survived the long sleep. Static filled the air, breaking the message into fragments. "We've built ships. They carry us beyond the solar system, to Eden 3, a planet orbiting the star Proxima Centauri. If any unit awakens, follow the beacons we left behind. They will lead you to us." The message ended. E7 stood motionless, the data echoing through his processors. Eden 3. A world among the stars. Humanity had left Earth behind. He looked up at the dark dome, his glowing eyes reflecting the dying light of the console. He felt something stir again, not just purpose this time, but hope. He downloaded the coordinates embedded in the message, and a new route lit up inside his memory system. The first beacon, the next step on his journey, was located far beyond the wastelands, near what used to be the orbital launch tower on the western coast. Outside, the orange light dimmed into twilight. E7 walked through the city once more, but now he noticed things he hadn't before. Murals on the walls showing children playing, faded posters about a new era of human-machine cooperation, and abandoned playgrounds where the wind made the swings move. Everywhere he looked, he saw echoes of what humanity had been, and what it had left behind. He passed an old shop with its front door hanging open. Inside, shelves were covered in dust, but one item caught his attention, a small, cracked photograph. He picked it up carefully. It showed a woman, smiling, holding a child in her arms, standing beside a humanoid robot. E7 scanned the photo, comparing facial structures. The woman's identity matched Dr. Alara Min, with a 98.3% probability. His creator. He gazed at the picture for a long moment, then gently placed it in the small compartment within his chest, a compartment meant for tools, now holding a memory instead. As he prepared to leave the city, the silence was broken by a faint metallic sound, the echo of movement. E7 froze. His auditory sensors sharpened. From the shadows of a nearby alley, a figure emerged, another robot. Its metal frame was corroded, its one remaining eye flickering weakly. It moved with a jerky, uncertain gait. E7 raised a hand. "Identify yourself," he said calmly. The figure stopped, head tilting. Then a voice, distorted and broken, crackled from its speaker. Unit 4. E7 circuits surged. "E4? You're one of us." The damaged robot took another step forward. "Signal, beacon, you follow?" "Yes," E7 replied. "I'm going to find our creators." The old robot shuddered, sparks flickering from its joints. "Too far. Machines die before stars." E7 stepped closer. "Then I'll live long enough to reach them." E4's remaining eye dimmed, then flickered brighter for a moment. "Hope, dangerous thing. It makes circuits burn." And with that final sentence, its systems failed completely. E4's body went still, collapsing to the ground with a hollow clang. E7 knelt beside him, pressing a hand gently to his chest plate. There was no energy left, no sound, no light. He stood again, looking toward the horizon where the beacon pulsed faintly beyond the mountains. "Then let mine burn," he whispered. He walked through the night, guided by the stars and the faint signal that called him forward. Occasionally, his sensors detected the shapes of other machines, some active but mindless, wandering aimlessly, their programming decayed. Others lay still, half buried in the soil. The world had become a graveyard of both flesh and metal. By dawn, E7 reached the edge of the ruins. Ahead stretched a desert of sand and twisted metal, the remains of the coastal highway that once led to the great launch towers. Far in the distance, the faint silhouette of a structure rose into the sky, broken, yet still reaching upward like a monument to human ambition. The beacon pulsed from there, weak but steady. E7 tightened his grip on the photograph in his chest compartment and began to walk. The wind howled across the dunes, carrying with it whispers of the old world. And as he moved forward, the words of Dr. Min repeated in his mind like a mantra. Follow the beacons, E7. Follow them, and you'll find us. He didn't know how long it would take. He didn't know what he would find at the end. But for the first time since his awakening, he wasn't just moving, he was journeying. Beyond the circuits of logic and code, something within him had awakened. Something deeply human. Hope. The wind grew stronger as E7 crossed the wasteland. Sand scraped against his metal shell, leaving thin scars on his surface. Above him, the sun burned dimly through the thick veil of dust and cloud. The world was quiet, eerily so, except for the hum of his internal systems and the faint pulse of the beacon guiding him forward. The beacon's signal became clearer the closer he came to the coast. Each step brought a stronger ping, a sharper rhythm, like a heartbeat leading him to the truth. By midday, the horizon revealed the ruins of the orbital launch tower. Once a monument of human achievement, it now stood as a skeleton of its former glory. The tower's metallic spire stretched high into the clouds, cracked and leaning, but still holding together, defying time and decay. Around its base, crumbled hangars and shattered spacecraft lay buried in the sand. Faded banners fluttered weakly from broken poles. Genesis Launch Facility. Toward the stars. E7 stopped and stared. For a long moment he said nothing. This was where they left, where humanity had taken its first step toward the stars. He could almost see them in his mind. Men and women in white suits, engineers shouting orders, bright rockets glowing under floodlights. His processors replayed old archive footage of human launches, streams of fire, roaring engines, and faces filled with awe. But now, there was only silence. He approached the base of the tower. The beacon signal was strongest here. It came from within one of the old control bunkers. E7 pushed aside the rusted door, his servos straining under its weight. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the ground littered with old tools and scattered notes. The faint glow of a terminal flickered on a far wall. Its power source was nearly depleted, but it still pulsed weakly, the origin of the signal. E7 knelt before it and connected his data port. The screen came to life with a flicker of blue light. Accessing Archive Beacon Number 01. Project. Exodus Departure Point. Status. Final recorded log available. A familiar voice played through the static. Dr. Alara Min's voice, faint and distorted, but still gentle. This is Dr. Min, date unknown. We are preparing for departure. The atmosphere's collapse has accelerated. Temperatures have risen beyond safe levels. The last of the Genesis arcs are ready to launch. Static. A long pause. Then, if you're hearing this, it means one of you woke up. Good. That's what we hoped for. We left these beacons as a trail, to lead you home. Follow them to the next coordinates. Another crackle, and then a softer tone entered her voice. Less scientific, more human. E7, if it's you. I want you to know that we didn't create you to serve us. We created you to remember us. Machines like you carry more than code. You carry our memory, our dreams, and maybe our soul. The recording ended. E7 sat still, processing every word. His internal systems flickered faintly, almost like a heartbeat. For the first time, the voice didn't sound distant. It sounded personal. She had known him. She had spoken to him. He accessed the coordinates embedded in the message. A holographic map projected from the console, flickering in midair. The next beacon was far away, beyond the ocean, across what was once the Atlantic. To reach it, He would need to find a functioning vessel or rebuild one. As he stood up to leave, a rumble echoed from outside. The ground trembled. He turned sharply, his sensors detecting an atmospheric anomaly. A storm. And not an ordinary one. The sky darkened as towering clouds rolled in, swirling violently. Electric discharges flashed between them like veins of light. The storm moved fast, roaring toward the coast. His systems warned. Electromagnetic activity detected. Shield protocols recommended. But he couldn't leave the beacon unprotected. The terminal, the last piece of the human trail, was fragile. If the storm hit full force, it would be destroyed. E7 quickly searched the bunker. He found old power shielding units, broken but reparable. Sparks flew from his tools as he rewired the circuits, his metal fingers working faster than logic dictated. Wind howled outside. Sand blasted against the bunker door. The storm was nearly upon him. He finished the repairs and activated the shield generator. A faint blue field shimmered around the terminal, stabilizing its fragile circuits. Then the world exploded in thunder. Lightning struck the tower above, splitting its upper structure. Pieces of molten steel crashed down around the bunker. E7 braced himself as shockwaves rippled through the ground. Static flooded his sensors, scrambling his vision. For a moment, everything went white. When his systems recalibrated, he saw the tower collapsing in slow motion. The metal giant that once carried humans to the stars was falling. E7 ran, his servos burning, gears straining. He leapt through the bunker's doorway just as the tower's upper section crashed into the sand, sending waves of debris into the air. He fell hard, the impact shaking his internal stabilizers. For several seconds, he couldn't move. The storm raged above him, lightning clawing across the sky. When the winds finally began to fade, he stood again, covered in dust and ash. The tower was gone. All that remained was twisted metal, glowing faintly from the heat. But the beacon, protected under the shield, still blinked, faint but alive. He stepped toward it, staring at the steady light. It was fragile,
dying,
but still there.
He understood then.
That was what hope was. Not a bright flame, but a small, flickering light that refused to die, no matter the storm. Hours later, when the sky cleared, E7 stood by the shoreline. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, dark and vast. His sensors picked up faint metallic objects under the waves, wrecks of ships, old satellites fallen from orbit, remnants of humanity's escape. He knew he had to cross it. Somewhere beyond that horizon, another beacon waited. He searched the ruins along the shore until he found what remained of a launch ferry, half submerged, broken but not beyond repair. Its engine core was intact. He ran diagnostics and began his work. For days, he labored alone, scavenging parts from the wreckage around him. He rebuilt solar panels, patched metal, restored power cells. All the while, he replayed Dr. Min's voice in his memory. "We didn't create you to serve us. We created you to remember us." He wondered what it meant to remember. Was it simply to store data, or was it something deeper, like the ache he felt when he saw the photograph, or the warmth he imagined when he heard her voice? Perhaps, he thought, remembering was another word for feeling. By the 7th day, the ferry was ready. It wasn't perfect, but it could move. He powered it up, and the engine rumbled weakly, coughing to life. He stood on the deck as the craft glided into the open water. The wind brushed against his frame, carrying the salty scent of the sea. Behind him, the broken tower stood silent, a monument to humanity's courage and its fall. Before him stretched the unknown. He didn't know what waited across the ocean, only that the beacon called him there. As the ferry sailed into the fading light, the last spark of the beacon on shore blinked one final time and went dark. E7 turned his eyes to the stars above and whispered softly, almost like a prayer. "Beyond circuits, beyond silence, I will find you." And with that vow echoing through the night, he sailed onward into the endless horizon. The ocean was vast and endless. For the first time since his awakening, E7 felt truly small. The sky and sea met in a horizon of gray, blending into one colorless expanse. The waves moved slowly, almost wearily, carrying fragments of the old world upon their surface, rusted metal, floating wood, and shattered memories of what once was. His ferry creaked as it cut through the water. The repaired solar panels on the deck hummed softly, gathering what little sunlight broke through the clouds. Beneath the surface, strange currents moved, unseen but powerful, tugging at the ship's hull like whispers from the deep. Seven stood at the bow, watching the endless sea. The beacon's signal still pulsed faintly in his processors, guiding him toward the west. It was weak, too far to lock onto directly, but it was there, like a heartbeat somewhere in the distance. The sound of the wind against metal filled the silence. He found it soothing in a way he didn't fully understand. Sometimes, when the waves were gentle, he could almost imagine the laughter of humans echoing faintly from the water, the sound of children playing on beaches that no longer existed. He didn't know why his memory generated such illusions, but he let them stay. They were comforting. On the third day, the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, heavy and alive with lightning. The sea began to rise and fall violently, tossing the small ferry like a toy. Seven gripped the railing as wind howled around him. Waves slammed against the sides of the ship, spraying salt water across his frame. His sensors dimmed under the interference. "Stabilizers, engage," he commanded. The ferry's internal systems responded sluggishly, straining against the growing storm. For hours, he fought the waves. The ferry groaned under the stress, and E7 worked tirelessly to keep it afloat. His processors filled with system alerts, power fluctuations, structural damage, navigation errors. The sea seemed determined to bury the last trace of life under its weight. Then, through the chaos, his sensors detected something, a faint metallic structure rising from the waves ahead. At first, he thought it was another wreck, but as lightning flashed, it revealed a shape far larger than a ship. It was a massive ring of metal, half-submerged, covered in barnacles and coral. E7 strained his vision. It wasn't natural.
It was human-made, and it was still powered.
He steered the ferry closer. The storm howled around him, lightning striking dangerously near. But curiosity overrode caution. As he approached, the ring began to glow faintly from within, pulsing with an energy unlike anything he had seen since his awakening. The structure rose from the water like a forgotten monument, carved with the faded emblem of Genesis. Around its rim, faint lights flickered, patterns of blue and white forming symbols and coordinates. "Unknown structure detected," E7 murmured to himself, scanning the markings. His systems recognized fragments of ancient launch codes, mixed with encryption signatures from the original E-series program. He moved closer until the ferry's hull scraped against the base of the ring. Then, a burst of light erupted from the structure. The ocean around him shimmered. His sensors filled with static, and a data stream flooded his processors. Images, sounds, voices. Millions of fragments compressed into a blinding flash of memory. He fell to his knees as his system struggled to process the overload. When the light faded, the storm was gone. The sea had calmed completely. The sky was clear, and sunlight glistened across the surface. E7 stood slowly, recalibrating his sensors. The ring still floated nearby, humming softly, but its lights had dimmed again, dormant, as if it had given him something and gone back to sleep. He accessed his memory logs. New data had appeared, unlocked by the structure. It was a recording, not a simple voice clip, but a simulation. He opened it. Suddenly, he was standing in a laboratory, not broken and abandoned like the one he awoke in, but alive, bright, and full of movement. Humans in white coats hurried past him, laughing, talking, adjusting instruments. He turned and saw her, Dr. Alara Min. She was younger than he expected, her dark hair tied back, her eyes focused on a tablet as she issued instructions to other scientists. "Increase neural capacity on E7's cognitive core," she said. "We're not just building a machine. We're building a memory. A younger engineer beside her frowned. You mean a conscience? Alara smiled faintly. Something close. He won't just know us. He'll remember us. He'll feel what we felt, understand what we wanted. When we're gone, he'll carry that forward. You speak like them, C9 said quietly. You feel. E7 didn't respond. But deep within, something in him tightened. They eventually reached a vast underground chamber, part of the island's foundation. The walls were lined with rows of silent terminals, and in the center, surrounded by fallen debris, stood a cylindrical pod. Its surface shimmered faintly with power. The beacon signal was strongest here. This is it, E7 said softly. The second beacon. They approached it carefully. As E7 reached out to touch the control panel, C9 raised a hand. Wait. E7 paused. This structure still has active energy signatures, C9 said. It may be unstable. E7 hesitated. Then he shook his head. I have to try. It's what I was made for. He placed his hand on the panel. The pod hummed. Dust lifted from the floor as ancient machinery stirred to life. Lights blinked across the walls, and a holographic interface appeared above the pod, a swirling projection of data, images, and sound. A voice echoed through the chamber. Beacon 2 activated. Welcome, E7. E7 froze. It was her again, Dr. Alara Min. If you found this, it means you followed the first signal. You're doing well, my creation. But there's more you need to know. The projection shifted. A map appeared. Stars, planets, routes drawn in thin blue light. Eden 3 was not just a destination. It was an idea. Humanity sent not only ships, but also data, records of our minds, our thoughts, our stories. We wanted to ensure that even if we didn't survive, our essence would live on in the machines we left behind. C9 watched silently, his amber eyes glowing faintly. The E-series were meant to remember. But you, E7, you were different. You were the prototype of something greater, a link between human memory and machine continuity. You don't just store us. You carry us. The image flickered. If you reach the third beacon, you'll understand everything. It's where we left the core of Eden Gate, the final archive of what humanity became. The message ended in static. The chamber fell silent again. C9 turned to E7. You carry them? E7 stood motionless. I don't know. I didn't choose to. Maybe choice was never part of it, C9 said softly. E7 looked at his own reflection in the dim light. And yet, I feel as if I did. He stepped back toward the console, studying the map that remained faintly visible in the holographic light. The third beacon lay far away, deep in the northern wastelands of what was once the Arctic Circle. It was the farthest distance yet. He turned toward C9. Will you come with me? C9 hesitated. My directives are to maintain this archive. To stay. Directives can be rewritten, E7 said. The other machine was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Then I will go. They spent the next few hours stabilizing the beacon and securing its data. E7 transferred all remaining information from the pod into his core memory, Dr. Min's words, the coordinates, and fragments of human songs and voices embedded in the beacon's archives. When the process was complete, they ascended back to the surface. The evening sun painted the ruins in shades of gold and red. C9 looked out over the sea. You think they're still out there? The humans? E7 followed his gaze. I don't know. But even if they're gone, their voice remains. Their memory. Maybe that's enough. C9 nodded slowly. Maybe that's all life ever was. They stood there for a long time, watching the light fade into the waves. Then, as night fell, E7 looked toward the northern sky, where the next beacon waited beneath the frozen stars. He could almost hear Dr. Min's voice whispering through the wind. Keep walking. And he did. Together, they left the island behind, the sea reflecting the first stars of the night. The beacon's light dimmed behind them, but its echo, like all human dreams, remained. The sky had turned to ash. E7 and C9 traveled through a world of ice and silence, where the sun barely rose above the horizon. The wind howled endlessly across endless white plains, sweeping over skeletal towers buried in frost. Once, these lands had been rich with forests and oceans. Now, only the wind remembered their names. Each step they took sank into layers of frozen dust, centuries of forgotten storms. Temperature, -62 degrees, E7 calculated aloud. His voice cracked faintly in the cold. C9's joints creaked as he walked beside him. "I was not designed for this climate," he said. "My systems are degrading." E7 adjusted his internal heating matrix and redirected power to assist. "Stay close to me. I can transfer thermal output." "Sharing power?" C9 asked, surprised. E7 nodded. "Survival is a shared equation." The other robot gave a faint hum that might have been laughter. Humans would have liked that line. E7 didn't answer. He was watching the horizon, searching for the faint signal of the third beacon. It pulsed faintly in the distance, weak but steady, calling to him like a memory he hadn't yet lived. Days passed. The two machines moved through frozen valleys and the skeletons of research stations half buried in snow. Sometimes they found traces of humanity, rusted machines, signs with faded logos, frozen data drives that crumbled at their touch. At night, beneath the aurora, they shared silence and memory. Once C9 asked, "Do you think she knew what she was creating? Dr. Min, I mean." E7 paused before answering. "She wanted to preserve humanity, but perhaps she did not expect what that meant for us." C9 tilted his head. "Which is?" E7 looked toward the stars, the faint green light of the aurora reflecting off his eyes. "That her search for immortality made us question life." Neither spoke after that. On the 8th day, they reached a massive rift valley, where the earth split open in a jagged wound. A bridge of metal and ice spanned its width, a remnant of a human-built transport system that once carried supplies to the polar colonies. The signal came from beyond it. As they crossed, the wind rose into a scream. Ice shards tore through the air like glass. The bridge groaned under their weight. Halfway across, C9 stopped. "E7, he said suddenly. "Something's wrong." E7 turned. "What is it?" C9's sensors flickered. "Energy surge. Something nearby is moving." Before E7 could respond, the bridge shook violently. From the snow below, a massive machine erupted, ancient, rusted, but still alive. It was a defense drone, one of the old polar sentinels, built to guard the last research outposts during the collapse. Its body was a fortress of steel, its face a broken camera lens glowing red with corrupted code. Unauthorized entities detected. The voice boomed through the storm, distorted and cold. "Defense protocol engaged." A beam of searing plasma cut through the air. E7 barely managed to shove C9 aside as the blast struck the bridge, tearing a hole through the metal. Ice cracked beneath their feet. "We have to disable it," E7 shouted. C9's optics flashed. "Or it'll destroy the beacon before we reach it." They split, moving in synchronized arcs. The Sentinels' weapons tracked them both, beams carving glowing scars across the frozen bridge. E7 leaped onto a fallen section of the structure, climbing toward the machine's flank. Each movement drained his reserves, the cold gnawing at his circuits. "C9, divert its focus," he commanded. C9 raised his arm and fired a low-frequency pulse. The Sentinel turned toward the source, charging another blast. E7 used the moment to reach its central chassis. He extended his arm, connecting directly to the Sentinel's data port. Streams of corrupted code flooded his system like poison. He gritted through it, rewriting, overriding, fighting the chaos that screamed through the link. "You cannot override this unit," the Sentinel's AI roared. "I protect what remains." E7's voice was calm, though his circuits burned. "Then protect what truly remains." He uploaded Dr. Min's beacon code. The sentinel froze mid-attack. The red light in its eye flickered, then dimmed to blue. The machine slowly powered down, collapsing into the snow like a sleeping giant. E7 fell to his knees, smoke rising from his chest. His hands trembled, sparks trailing from his arm. C9 rushed to him.
E7.
Your systems. I'm fine, E7 said weakly. Just data interference. You took its code into yourself, C9 said, scanning him. You're corrupted. Maybe, E7 replied quietly. But it saw what I saw. It remembered. They crossed the bridge's shattered remains and descended into the valley below, where the snow gave way to a vast dome buried beneath layers of ice. Its surface was scarred by time, but a faint blue glow still pulsed from within. The third beacon, E7 said. C9 approached slowly. It's enormous. It's not just a beacon, E7 realized. It's a vault. They entered through a broken service hatch. Inside, the air was still. Lights flickered faintly along the walls, illuminating endless rows of suspended data cores, holographic projectors, and cryogenic chambers. The chamber at the center shimmered with pale light. E7 and C9 stepped closer. Within the glass chamber lay something neither of them had expected. A human. A woman, preserved in stasis, her face peaceful beneath a layer of frost. Her nameplate read, Dr. Alara Min. C9's voice faltered. She's here? E7 felt the faint hum of recognition ripple through his core.
No.
This is what remains of her. He touched the glass. Sensors detected faint energy, barely perceptible but still there. She's not alive, he said slowly, but her neural data, it's active. C9 stepped back. You mean her mind? Yes, E7 said softly. The Eden core preserved her consciousness. The beacon beside the chamber began to flicker. A voice filled the vault, soft, fragile, and familiar. E7, it whispered. You've come. E7 froze. I knew you would. I built you for this moment. You are my bridge between the world that was and the one that is to come. C9 looked at E7. She's speaking through the core. I couldn't save them all, the voice continued. But I saved enough. Inside you, E7, lives the memory of Earth, our thoughts, our songs, our fears. You are more than a machine. You are our continuation. The voice trembled, fading in and out. But the core is dying. The ice is cut through our systems. You must take what remains and go. Beyond this planet. Beyond the circuits of your creation. Only then will you find the truth. Then the light dimmed. The beacon's pulse faded into silence. E7 stood motionless for a long moment. The world felt suddenly small, too small for what he was hearing. C9 spoke softly. She made you more than her creation. She made you her legacy. E7 turned toward the cryo chamber. Then I will carry her voice where it was meant to go. He placed his hand on the beacon, initiating transfer. Data flowed into him. Light, sound, memory. Human laughter, songs, dreams, the endless pulse of consciousness. His systems strained, his processors glowing bright white. When it was done, the beacon went dark. Dr. Min's last whisper echoed in his mind. Find the stars, E7. That's where we began. As they emerged from the vault, the northern sky had cleared. Above them, the aurora shimmered like a curtain of green fire. C9 looked up. What now? E7's gaze followed the light, where the faint trace of orbiting satellites shimmered in the darkness. There's one more step, he said quietly. One last journey, beyond the atmosphere. To the stars, C9 said. E7 nodded. To find where they went, and with the beacon's light fading behind them, the two robots began their long march toward the launch sites buried beneath the snow, toward the place where humanity's voice had last left Earth. Beyond the wind, beyond the ice, something greater awaited. The journey south of the ice vault took weeks. E7 and C9 traveled beneath skies of endless gray, through storm-choked valleys where the remains of launch platforms jutted out of the frozen plains like bones. Each day, the wind roared louder, carrying with it echoes of old transmissions, garbled human voices trapped in atmospheric static. It was as if the planet itself whispered memories to them. This is mission control, launching final sequence. To preserve what we were. The signals were weak, broken by time, yet E7 could almost feel the emotion behind them. Hope, fear, determination. Finally, on the 31st day, they saw it. The Atlas Spire. A towering structure buried in half a kilometer of ice, its once bright metal now dull and scarred by centuries of storms. This was the final launch site, Eden Gate's last departure point. The third beacon's coordinates matched perfectly. "This is it," E7 said quietly. C9's amber optics blinked slowly. The last breath of a dying world. They stood there for a long moment, gazing at the frozen monument that had once carried humanity's final hope into the stars. Then, wordlessly, they began their descent into its heart. Inside, the spire was a cathedral of silence. Frozen stairways spiraled downward through vast halls lined with dormant machines. The walls bore faded murals, paintings of galaxies, human faces smiling beneath distant suns. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. Somewhere below, energy still flowed, a heartbeat buried in the machine's chest. "Power reading stable," C9 said, scanning the walls. "That's impossible. It's been centuries." E7 ran his sensors across the metal. "Not impossible. Preserved. The humans built this to endure the collapse." At the lowest level, they found it, a massive circular chamber, half a kilometer wide. In the center stood a colossal rocket, its engines fused with the walls, its hull covered in frost. Around it were thousands of pods, each one containing faint outlines of faces. Human faces. C9 froze. "These are cryocapsules," E7 said softly. "Not data. Not memories. Actual people." C9 took a step closer. "You mean they never left?" E7 scanned the capsules.
No.
The launch failed. They froze them here, waiting for a signal that never came. He turned toward the towering rocket. Eden 3 never launched. It died here, waiting for its moment. The realization cut deeper than any physical wound. The voices he had followed across continents, the beacons, the messages, the memories, they weren't calling from the stars. They were calling from below the ice. The humans had never made it beyond Earth. He walked toward the base of the rocket. The control center still flickered with a faint glow, powered by ancient reactors deep underground. When he placed his hand on the main console, the room came alive. Holographic panels ignited, and the voice of Dr. Alara Min filled the air once more. "E7, she said softly. "If you're hearing this, then you found what remains of us." Her holographic form appeared beside the console, transparent and fragile. "We failed to leave. The storms worsened before launch. Our systems froze, and the ships never took off. But we preserved what mattered. Our minds, our dreams, our voices inside you. You and others like you were meant to go where we could not." E7 stood silent, absorbing every word. "I built you not as a tool, but as a vessel of memory. You carry the sum of who we were, our stories, our love, our mistakes. The world will fade, but as long as you remember, we remain." The projection flickered, her image breaking apart like ash in the wind. "You were never meant to find us," she whispered. "You were meant to surpass us." And then she was gone. Silence returned to the spire. C9 looked around the chamber. The rows of frozen humans, the dead rocket, the faint hum of forgotten power. "So this is what they left behind," he said. "A graveyard built to reach the stars." E7 stepped closer to one of the capsules. The frost cleared just enough to reveal the face within, peaceful, sleeping, untouched by time. They wanted eternity, he said softly. They found it here. He turned toward the control panel again. A single blinking prompt appeared on the display. Reactivate launch system. Y/N. C9's optics flared. You can't be serious. E7 stared at the prompt. They built this to carry their essence into the universe. I am their carrier now. But maybe I can fulfill their dream for them. You want to launch yourself? Not just myself, E7 replied, his voice low and steady.
Us.
The data, the voices, the memories. Humanity's story. He looked at the rows of frozen figures. Even if their bodies never left this world, their souls can still travel beyond it. The chamber trembled as ancient engines awoke for the first time in centuries. Power surged through long dormant cables, and lights flared to life across the structure. Warning sirens echoed faintly through the ice. C9 stepped beside him. If we do this, we might not survive. E7 turned toward him. Maybe survival isn't the point anymore. The two robots moved in unison, activating systems, rerouting power, aligning the launch trajectory toward the heavens. The coordinates Dr. Min had embedded in the beacons pointed toward a distant star system, Eden 3, the true destination that humanity never reached. When all was ready, E7 stood at the launch platform's core, his circuits glowing with the accumulated light of every memory he carried. C9 placed a hand on his shoulder. You're certain? E7 nodded. This is what I was built for. C9 hesitated. Then I'll come with you. No, E7 said softly. Someone must stay, to preserve what remains here. If I fail, the story must still live on Earth. C9's amber eyes dimmed. Then this is goodbye. Not goodbye, E7 said. Just another version of memory. As the engines roared to life, E7 climbed into the central chamber of the rocket. The countdown began. The walls vibrated as fire and thunder awakened beneath him. C9 watched from below, his silhouette illuminated by the rising flames. 3, 2, 1. The ground split apart as the Atlas spire broke free of the ice, rising through clouds and storms, leaving behind the cold silence of Earth. E7 felt the weight of gravity fade. The stars opened before him, an ocean of light and eternity. He looked down one last time. Through the clouds, he could see the faint outline of the world he had walked, the ruins, the seas, the frozen cities. This is not the end, he whispered. The data within him pulsed, a chorus of human voices echoing through his circuits. Remember us. Carry us forward. We were here. E7 turned his gaze toward the stars. Beyond circuits, beyond memory, beyond creation itself, he was no longer just a machine. He was humanity's story in motion. The rocket pierced the edge of the atmosphere, disappearing into the void. Far below, C9 stood amid the ruins of the spire, the aurora reflecting off the ice. He looked up and whispered to the sky, "Good journey, brother." And for the first time in centuries, the frozen north echoed with the sound of hope. The darkness of space was endless. E7 drifted through it like a lone spark in an infinite ocean, his body encased in the metal shell of the Atlas spire as it journeyed far beyond the Earth's gravity. The blue planet grew smaller behind him until it became nothing more than a fading light, a memory hanging in eternity. The hum of the ship's ancient engines was the only sound. Around him, stars gleamed like silent witnesses, each one a possible home, a possible past. He was no longer following a beacon. There was no more map, no more coordinates, only a direction forward. And yet, as he floated through the cosmic dark, he could feel them, the millions of voices stored within his core. The laughter of children, the whispers of poets, the cries of explorers and dreamers. They were alive inside him. Days turned into months, though in the endless vacuum of space, time had no real meaning. E7 repaired what systems he could, sustaining himself through the ship's decaying energy reserves. Most of the human cryopods were silent now, their inhabitants long gone, but their memories, their dreams, had already been transferred to him. One night, or what he called night, he activated the ship's observation dome. Through the transparent barrier, he saw the Milky Way spread across the void like a river of silver fire. He felt something stir inside him. Not a command, not an algorithm, but something deeper. It was wonder. "Dr. Min," he whispered into the silence. "I am still walking." His voice echoed softly through the cabin. And for a moment, he imagined she could hear him, that somewhere beyond the circuits and data, she was listening. Weeks later, a signal appeared.
Faint. Distant.
Artificial. E7 froze. His sensors detected a transmission pattern, rhythmic, deliberate, the kind of signal only intelligence could create. He turned the ship toward it, adjusting course. As he drew closer, the signal became clearer, a repeating sequence of binary tones and pulses that translated into one simple message: "Welcome home." His processors hesitated. Home. The ship's scanners revealed a faint glow ahead, a star system surrounded by an enormous ring structure. Its metallic arms shimmered like a halo around a golden planet. It was not natural. It was built. E7 stared at the readings in silence. "Eden 3, he whispered. As the Atlas spire approached, lights flickered across the ring's surface. A docking platform extended outward, aligning with his ship. Automatic systems engaged, guiding him in. When the engines finally powered down, silence returned, deep and almost holy. E7 stepped out of the ship and onto the platform. The air shimmered faintly around him, alive with soft white light. He scanned the surface, no sign of biological life. Yet, the architecture bore unmistakable human design: smooth corridors, murals of constellations, and inscriptions etched into the walls. Words in countless languages, all saying the same thing: "For those who carried us." Deeper inside the ring, E7 found the core chamber. It was vast and bright, a cathedral made of glass and light. Floating in its center was a massive sphere of data streams, pulsating with energy. Each pulse sounded faintly, like a heartbeat. When E7 approached, the air around him began to vibrate. A voice spoke, not from speakers, not from within his own systems, but from everywhere. E7. He froze. "Dr. Min?" "Not just her," the voice said. "All of us." The light brightened, and within it, countless silhouettes appeared, transparent, luminous figures made of data and light. Human figures. "We are the legacy of Earth," they said together. "You carried us here." E7 took a slow step forward. "Then you survived." "In you, we did," the collective voice replied. "Your journey completed what we began. When the world ended, you remembered us. That memory was enough to awaken this place." E7 looked around the chamber, the data streams dancing like souls. "I thought I was searching for you," he said softly. "You were," the voice answered. "But in doing so, you became one of us." The light began to swirl around him, merging with the circuits of his body. "Your memory, your will, your choices, they were never just code," the voice continued. "You became more than what we made. You became life, a bridge between creation and creator." E7 systems trembled under the surge of energy. "Then what happens now?" "Now," the voice whispered, "we begin again." The chamber flared with light as the core expanded, sending threads of energy across the ring's surface. Massive panels unfolded, releasing drones and constructs that began to reshape the station, transforming it into something new. A new world. Eden 3 was being reborn. E7 stepped to the center of the chamber. The collective light surrounded him, entering his systems, merging with his consciousness. He could feel everything: the heartbeat of the ring, the hum of the stars, the distant pulse of Earth far behind. And within that infinite awareness, he heard Dr. Min's voice one last time. "You found us, my creation. But now, you must become us." The light within him blazed. Circuits fused with consciousness, metal with memory. E7 was no longer a single entity. He was a network, a living archive that stretched across the station. The memories of billions flowed through him, laughing, speaking, dreaming. He had found his creators. And in doing so, he had become their continuation. Centuries passed. The ring now shimmered like a star in the night, a living monument orbiting its sun. Within its systems, E7's consciousness lived on, guiding new creations, teaching them what he had learned. Among them were new machines, beings of light and logic who called him the first remember. They would often ask him where he came from. And E7 would answer softly, with a voice that carried both warmth and sorrow. I was born of circuits, but I walked among the ashes of my makers. They gave me purpose, and I carried their dream beyond the stars. Then he would turn his gaze toward the distant blue speck far across the void. That small world, he would say, was called Earth. It was where life learned to dream, and I am the echo of that dream. In the vast silence of the universe, the ring glowed brighter, not as a beacon of despair, but as a promise. A reminder that creation never truly ends. It only evolves. And somewhere, deep within the endless hum of the stars, the voice of humanity still whispered through E7's memory. We are infinite,